C2 Wrestling Podcast, CTD and Snowden, the boys are back. Plenty of wrestling to talk about. We had probably the Monday Night Raw of the year, best show they've had. The previous weeks of not great Monday Night Raws and SmackDowns seem to be fading away, and we seem to be on track with some better shows. NXT, we had some big stuff happen. All of these things. We got Survivor Series coming up just a little over a week away. We've got the run to John Cena's final match where I will probably cry on camera. We got a lot to talk about. But first, how you doing today, Snowden?
I am doing all right. I'm tired today. I had some breakfast before this. It's a little bit of an early-ish morning podcast for C2.
It's
We get them,
11.
yeah, early-ish, like I said. We get them done when we can here at C2. Today's podcast, there's definitely a bit of things to get into. You ran through a little bit of it. Wild 2 weeks for WWE, a couple wild weeks to come, with everything going on. John Cena, War Games, the road to the Rumble's not far away. There is a bit to get into. We do have predictions next week for Survivor Series, so looking forward to that as well. What do you want to talk about?
I'm glad you mentioned the Rumble
Hmm.
because normally, look, Survivor Series time, there is a lot of focus on Survivor Series, but there's a little bit more of like Rumble promo and Rumble talk. It doesn't really feel like that. I feel like a lot of it has been like Mania promo, Mania
Hmm.
talk. And obviously, a big key to that is the Rumbles in Saudi. So it's not like you just pop on Ticketmaster and buy tickets. It's a little bit
Yeah.
different. So it is a little bit weird that it's like, yeah, the Rumble's right around the corner, and it feels like it's the least they've talked about the Rumble.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is. I do think it being in Saudi plays part because it is not being promoted as like, hey, it's in fucking San Diego, go buy tickets like War
Yeah.
Games. I also think if it wasn't for John Cena's retirement in a few weeks, it would be let's move it along to the Rumble. Let's get there, let's get there. I feel like every year around Survivor Series, people are like, oh man, whoever wins the 5-on-5 or the war games should be in the Rumble. That should be the prize. So there's usually some correlation in that sense, but haven't quite gotten it all too much. Rumble in Saudi, whatever. It is what it is at this point. It's obviously going to happen. Mania's in Saudi next year, the following year, maybe if I should put it that way. So it's only going to get a little bit worse in that sense. A lot of Mania promotion, though, for it being run back in Vegas. Good commercial, lack thereof a commercial. I'm sure some people are looking at it that way, but they've been running that ad. I feel like Netflix is a little different with the ads ever since Raw's been there. Every time they ad break, that's the ad I'm getting, has been that Mania 42 promo where they're all playing poker at the table. I feel like I've already seen that 100 times by now. So the Mania is being driven home, but I haven't seen anything regarding the Rumble.
Well, I think there's only going to be one more if they have Brock talk, because they've had Punk, they've
Hmm.
had Cody, they've had Roman, they've had Triple H. It's either going to be Brock or Heyman's just going to talk for Brock, and that's going to be kind of the wrap up. We know there is a women's one coming that seemed to be filmed. Shocker. Like we
Yeah.
said, I don't know why people were going insane about a promo for a show that was 6 months away, and we're still, I don't know, 5.5 months away.
It's also like people acted like there wasn't wrestlers in the promo,
Yeah,
Like I get it. They didn't have Rhea Ripley sitting at the poker table. I get it to a point, sure. It's the fucking top what, five guys in the company, Like we'll be okay.
yeah, exactly. And now the top women are going to have their own
Yeah.
promo, and it's going to be great. I think
Mhm.
people need to, cool it, pump the brakes, relax as my cats go insane as I watch on the camera because they have just been
Waiting
on
for that
one.
women's commercial.
Yeah,
They've
yeah.
been waiting for it.
No,
Yeah.
they're hearing this Rumble talk and they're practicing. They're trying to, do their sprints, they're running ropes, you name it. They don't stop. It truly is just never ending here in this household. But Mania promo. it feels like Mania like is coming before the Rumble with how much we see of Mania. You know, you kind of forget that not only do we have Survivor Series, Cena's last match, the Rumble, and there's the Chamber too that they just
Mhm.
announced for Chicago. So it's like there's just been so much on Mania promotion. There is a piece of me that, don't get me wrong, I know they're like really harping on it because tickets, and I'm sure they're super expensive and they're slowly coming out. There's a piece of me that they're like, they know how fucking bad last year's Mania was, and they're trying to really push this one. And they also know next year's Mania, as in 2027, is in Saudi. So pretty much no one around here is going to be going to it. So it feels like that's why the extra emphasis is going on this year's Mania.
Yeah, I'm running it back in Vegas. I feel like they're really driving that point home too. They're kind of trying to erase the only Vegas mania they've had so far with another one. Um, there is three highlights out of Mania 41, with Dom winning the IC title, the Roman Punk Rollins triple threat, Rhea versus Io was great. Outside of that, it's a bad Mania. It was not quite hitting.
Fatu LA
Uh,
Knight wasn't bad. It was
See,
just a little
I see
shorter.
my recollection of that is it wasn't what it should have been.
Yeah.
Like that match could have been so much more and should have been, in my opinion. But I don't hate it in comparison
Yeah.
to some other stuff, but it is not a great Mania. In theory, it's pretty easy to have a better Mania, but I don't want just a better WrestleMania. They got to go above and beyond because of what they gave us last year, not only at WrestleMania, but the first 6 months of this year, 7 months maybe, were pretty rough. A lot revolving kind of. John Cena. I don't even get the fucking meme still. I don't like. I'm so out of the loop. Like I see it. Oba's doing it, and Javon Evans at all these events and shit.
Carmelo.
Carmelo. I don't. As I hit my mic, I don't get it. I have no idea. But how the fuck did I happen to do that? By the way, too. Of course, those are the two.
Every time.
Every time. I want this Mania to exceed expectations, and I think it's easy to do so because last year's Mania and this year's booking in general hasn't been great. But you gotta go above and beyond. I want something special. Also, considering you're fucking us with the Rumble this year being in Saudi, and we're kind of skipping a year with Mania in Saudi the following
We did get something special Monday night. We
year.
got an all-time Monday Night Raw. It was one of those, you said it best in our post-show recap. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. Wish they could do this every week. You know, it's like
Do it again.
it's almost annoying. Yeah, do it again next week,
Yeah.
and then the following week, and then the following week. Like, run it back, run it back. I mean, from top to bottom, them being at MSG, like you knew it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a doozy. It was a great show. It's funny because on paper, people were expecting something really crazy for Cena's final Raw match, and you and I were cool with what they did with the six-man tag match. Uh, I think if people got handed that beforehand without knowing anything else, they would have been like, "Oh, this Raw is going to be a letdown. This Raw is going to be,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a reason they didn't, promote John Cena in a 6-man tag, going into that Raw too, is because that is not as extravagant on paper as even what is Cena going to do, let alone Cena having a singles match. They're running back Dom. I said it too. It is interesting that in Cena's 4 matches, last 3 or 4 matches, they're running a rematch with Dom. I get it to a point. I understand why people want like fresh. You'd rather Cena face somebody he's never faced. There's a handful of guys, we can go through the laundry list of people that are gonna forever be what ifs in the John Cena sphere. But if there is a guy that you're gonna run back a match with, it probably is Dom. IC title on the line makes sense. Ronaldo itself, there was a lot going on revolving John Cena, not just his final Raw match, but some tournament matches, a return for the tournament match. That whole Raw was kind of focused around John Cena. They usually go hard for MSG to begin with. Anything in these bigger, Chicago's MSGs, LA's tend to get a lot of big shows. But without John Cena, would it have been as special of a night? Would they have done as much, gone as hard? What is the plan of action after December 13th is kind of where this all leads me. Raw was great. SmackDown's been refreshed, and that's lacking John Cena. So they're doing something with SmackDown there. But Monday Night Raw has been rough when John Cena isn't around as of late. Braun's been great. Bronson Reed, the Vision. There's some highlights, but once John Cena's done in a few weeks, how are you going to keep this momentum?
It's interesting because right now you don't have a feud for the WWE title, and you kind of have a feud for the world title, possibly two feuds, but no like, oh, Punk is facing this person right after Survivor Series,
Yeah, I
whatever.
guess it's the same with like. I guess you got Drew still and Cody.
I would assume that story's over, right?
You would, but then why is Drew in War Games? It makes me think they run it
Yeah,
back one more
but
time.
but if they do, it's like, man, we just fell right back into
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same nonsense. Like, not that that matchup was nonsense. We've just seen it a million times now. They have after Survivor Series, what, 2 weeks of shows before the Saturday Night's main event.
yeah,
I still like maybe we start to get who Cody's gonna face at the Rumble. Maybe it's that, but it's gonna be a lot more on setting up the exhibition matches between NXT and the main roster and the tournament matches. Those are going to be the main focal parts of the show. So, really, it is after December 13th, like you mentioned, Cena's final match. It's got to be, I don't want to say you got to pull out the big guns, but especially with the Rumble being in Saudi, like, it's got to be like an Orton return and attacks Cody, or Punk and Roman face off or something. Because if they just go December 13th happens, and on SmackDown we're setting up a Cody Drew rematch, and on Raw they're just setting up Punk Logan, it's gonna feel like we're back to what we were watching a month ago.
yeah. I mean, it definitely is. Yeah, we've made this point, and I got to reiterate it though. I love Punk Logan. I think that's a matchup
Yes.
that they should do at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the Rumble match for CM Punk is versus Logan. The Rumble is arguably the second, if not third, biggest PLE of the year on paper. CM Punk, we can see facing a lot of guys, but biggest name he could face is probably Logan Paul right now. So I could see it. I mean, in theory, Roman might be bigger, but I can envision them wanting to potentially save that for a Mania or a future SummerSlam, something along those lines. Post Cena's retirement, again, it is going to be tough if they just fall back into the groove of Monday Night Raw being, LA Knight and Jey Uso are kind of feuding and Punk is around and the Vision is attacking guys to open and close the show. This is where you really got to spice it up, and you do finally, as the world is predicting to a point, you bring back the Austin Theories and you have him join the Vision. You spice something up a little bit. You maybe let go of Cody Drew and you really let Alistair get a swing at Cody, something a little bit more fresh. Uh, IC title might go back to Dom. Maybe it's finally time for the Judgment Day to get somewhere in their finishing up storyline. It is interesting. John Cena is not going to be on every week. They can't really, hope on John Cena to really bring in the crowd at this point. Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, The Vision, Ilya on SmackDown. A lot of these guys are still fresh. They're newer. They're not quite bringing in the crowd like those vets are. Maybe this is where you get a couple call ups too. Just pre Rumble, right around the Rumble. Not saying they're all going to be in Mania matches, but we do also have the NXT main roster exhibitions at Saturday Night's main event. I can easily see that being kind of the call up for an Oba Femi or a Trick Williams, or I would have said a JC Jane, but she just recaptured the NXT championship, so we'll see where they go with that. But maybe the roster needs a little bit of a refreshment post John Cena to kind of keep people in line.
Yeah, the show ends on Raw with Roman and Brock coming out, and you
First
mentioned,
time ever.
yeah, you mentioned that it kind of feels like they were setting up potentially another Roman Brock match. And with the Rumble being in Saudi, like that seems like a matchup people in Saudi would want. And I was thinking about it the last day or so since you mentioned that. I'm like, yeah, I could see it and like I wouldn't be shocked and they probably will do it. But man, like these just newer people need to be in these stories with Braun with Brock and Roman. Like Braun needs to be working towards this Roman match and Brock needs to be doing something with some, you know, baby face that's got potential. Whatever. I'm throwing a random name out there, like a Jacob Fatu. Like I don't know. I'm not gonna be upset if they do the match, but those guys just aren't around enough that like if we use these next few weeks where Roman faces Brock or they're in War Games and it sets up a Roman Brock match. Hell, even if it's something where Roman's doing something with Jimmy and Jay a little bit too much, it's like these other people that are there that are going to be on every single week. We need to start getting the benefits of them working with these guys because they're not going to be on every single week. So when it comes to the Raw after Mania and Brock and Roman go on hiatus again, I want the Gunthers, the Braun Breakers, the Jacob Fatus to have wrapped up stories with them where it's like, all right, these guys now they're kind of at that next level and more people are even more invested. You and I, we're going to watch either way. Like we're invested, but we got to keep putting stock in these fresher guys. So when those others aren't there, Gunther retiring John Cena and facing Brock or whatever. Now when Gunther faces Carmelo Hayes, Trick Williams, or whatever, someone who's not at his level, it feels great for them to be taking on someone of his stature. So that kind of like stuck with me that like I don't think they will, but with the way they work in Saudi, like we really might get Roman Brock at the Rumble and just, man, it just feels like we're wasting time.
Yeah, it does feel like a big waste of time. Roman Brock is, again, we said this during our Raw review. It's a new version of Roman. It's a new version of Brock. I get it in that sense. Doesn't mean I need it. Doesn't mean I want
Yeah.
it. It doesn't make it not the same thing that we got 10 years ago, 25 times, whatever. Uh, don't need it at all. I do want to see these fresh names get in the mix up with a lot of these guys. I'm glad you mentioned Gunther, our GOAT, the ring general, because Gunther is a guy that finds himself in a very interesting spot now where there's a few names that come to mind. The Undertaker, Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns. Those are kind of like the three big bads in a way of the WWE. Not even if they're bad guys at the time, but those are the three. Taker had the streak. Brock wrestles twice a year. Roman's been on that schedule for a while, had his incredible title run. Like, those are the three names that if you land the Brock match or you land the Roman match or the Taker match, that's bigger than a championship match a lot of the
Yep.
time. There's a lot of weight being held to that. And that's becoming Gunther. Gunther's had his title runs. I'm sure he'll get plenty more. He retired Goldberg. He'll retire John Cena. He'll go on to maybe win the Rumble, maybe face Brock, maybe win the title at Mania. You know, he's becoming that guy, Gunther. And he's, not the youngest guy. He's not the oldest yet out of the crop of talent, but he is still able to be around every week, doesn't have to wrestle every week, especially if he's champion at that point, retires John Cena. He maybe shouldn't be having a match on Monday Night Raw every week. You got to keep it a little bit special. But he becomes that guy that is at least on TV weekly, unlike Brock and Roman, where you can have him mix it up with Braun Breakers, Carmelos, Grayson Wallers, these guys that we want to see more of and help them get that spotlight. It's tough with these part-time schedules. I get the part-time schedules on a lot of these guys. It makes sense. It does, as much as people complain and this is Roman returned again, I get it. It keeps it special a little bit, and again, it makes it more of an extravaganza when Roman Reigns does come around to wrestle. But there is on the counter side something also special about that same height of talent being around every week and mixing it up with all the young guys.
Yeah, I mean, kind of what Punk is doing. Like Punk
Yeah,
doesn't wrestle
Punk
on
is the perfect
TV.
example.
He
Yeah.
doesn't wrestle on TV every week, but he's around. He's mixing it up with all these guys. When he does wrestle on Raw, it feels big. Like,
Yeah.
oh, all right, we're
This
getting a
this could
Punk
be
match on
CM
Raw.
Punk's last fucking Raw
Yeah,
match. You have
yeah,
no
we're getting
idea.
Punk on
Yeah.
Raw tonight, whatever. And then obviously he's wrestling at the PLEs, and they're all relevant matches. They're all big matches. Like Punk is, he's probably the perfect example of it. And we see people like Gunther was benefiting big time from his short story with Punk. If anything, I wish it was longer. We're going to see Braun Breaker and Logan Paul and them benefit from being with Punk and kind of latching on to him and having these stories with him. Gunther is the greatest. Obviously,
Of all
I
time.
love him so much. When we got through Raw, and it's pretty clear like Gunther's winning this fucking tournament. If he doesn't, like truly, I'd be stunned. I really started thinking about Mania, and like I talked about thinking about if Roman Brock is the Rumble match. Mania just feels weird because it goes back to last year's Mania, where we sat here and we're like, man, so many people have so many options and there's so many directions and there's all these intertwined stories. And we're back in that spot again. And we were in that spot other shows. And some shows it's been great. But I still have that fear from last year's Mania. I do think they're gonna right some wrongs, but I think of a Gunther, I think of off the top of my head, like legit 4 to 5 genuine possibilities for his Mania match. And then at the same time, I'm like, I could easily make a case for those 4 or 5 people to be facing someone else. And that kind of worries me because I expect Gunther to be in a marquee match. But what is that marquee match? Like, what is it going to be? And on top of it, Gunther better fucking win at Mania after losing these last two.
Gunther better fucking win at Mania. I'm still running with the idea that I think Gunther probably wins the Rumble off the back of retiring John Cena. I think they'll save the Brock Gunther match for Minnesota SummerSlam. Makes sense to me. But Gunther easily could get Brock, Roman, Cody, Punk. Like there's just so many options there, in a sense. And then again, there's other options for all those names if I was to go through those. Gunther finds himself in a very intriguing spot. He is the favorite to win this tournament. Listen, if he were to lose it, I fucking love Carmelo. I love Carmelo Hayes. If he were to lose it and Carmelo won, I don't know. Something had to go wrong. Like it just seems crazy for it to not be Gunther at this point. And again, you can't really have a guy, especially to the caliber of Gunther, retire John Cena and then not go on to do anything after it. They
Yeah.
surely could have Brock cost Gunther the Rumble, and then that leads into the Brock Gunther match at WrestleMania. But it just seems so fast track this guy to the championship. Gunther already held the world championship. Maybe it's time to put the WWE championship on him and switch him up a little bit. We could very well be looking at Gunther Cody, but then what do you do with Orton? Is it Orton Cody? It does seem like with Cody and Orton, it's maybe now or never. If you're not going to kind of get into that at this point, are you ever going to do the Cody Orton feud? So, to answer one question, there's another question behind it. It's very tough to plan out exactly what's going to happen right now.
So one path that I could see with you mentioning Orton, I could see this happening, but a big factor to this is John Cena still the Intercontinental Champion when he goes against Gunther or not? If he's not, which I hope he is, and I hope Dom wins the title back somehow, cheats, does something, Cena loses to Gunther, there is a path where we do get Orton Cody at the Rumble. And maybe that they face again at the Chamber or something. The path would be Gunther wins the Rumble, and then we get the Jacob Fatu return, and it comes out that Orton attacked Fatu. Mania, you get Fatu versus Orton, gives Fatu that marquee match as well, because it feels like you want to talk about a guy who was here and then out of nowhere just poof.
Yeah.
He needs to get back to where he was and that level. I know he's dealing with an injury right now. But that could be the route where you then end up getting Gunther versus Cody for the WWE title. And Orton versus Fatu in one of their marquee matches that's not a title match. The not counter, the question I would then pose to that is, would Gunther Cody main event night two, or would this be the year that the world title main events night two, and it's something with Punk, Roman, Braun Breaker, maybe Rollins is back, I don't know. That would also string things into question because if they want Cody as the main event of night two, does that change who they want him facing? Does that mean it has to be Orton? I don't know.
It is tough, you know. I mean, this all does play back onto that Rollins injury, as crazy as it is. You add another guy into the mix, and in theory, you'd go, "Oh wow, that would make it more complicated." But if we added Rollins back into the picture, I think it kind of clears up the path to
Yeah.
WrestleMania because Rollins is maybe the guy that didn't have as many possibilities. It seemed pretty evident Rollins would have gotten Punk or Roman or both of them again at WrestleMania. The idea was not to break up the division. They would have been holding strong had Rollins not got hurt, you would imagine. Uh, Without Rollins, now it's up in the air. That world title, was maybe guaranteed to main event night two, and now it's maybe not. It depends. I do think this would be the Mania where you do switch it up a little bit and you have Cody probably close out night one, no matter what his match is. And maybe that night two is Punk versus Braun Breaker, and you give Braun Breaker his moment. Maybe that's the swerve at the Rumble this year. Is that Braun Breaker wins the Rumble, and that's how he gets his title match. But again, it's hard with the John Cena retirement. That is bigger than the Rumble win. The John Cena retirement match. You retire John Cena, you should be main eventing the next PLE or winning the Rumble or main eventing Mania. Like that should grant you something more than just the accolade of retiring John Cena. A lot to look forward to, though. I mean, the Rumble alone is going to be a mega event. Again, I mean, people may hate on it a little bit, but CM Punk versus Logan is a huge match. Have to go that route. If they do run back Roman Brock, people may hate on it. That's a huge match. The Rumble matches themselves, it is in Saudi, one night show. I don't expect it to be any more than probably four matches in total, including both Rumbles. Sami Zayn still holds some power in potentially winning that. That would be an incredible moment in Saudi. That would throw a huge curveball into all the Mania plans if they did go the Sammy route. 6, 8 months ago, I was locked in on it being Sammy, but things changed a little bit with John Cena retiring. Gunther looks pretty slated to win. There's just a lot of questions that are going to be answered pretty soon. I just want them answered now.
I'm so impatient. From Raw as well, we did obviously get advancement in the Cena tournament. We got the War Games matches finalized. The women's is just about to be finalized. We know what it's going to be. But we did also get, speaking of Gunther, his match against Javon Evans. And I did want to talk about Javon because we got a story about Javon Evans from some media outlets about how John Cena and Sheamus were raving about Javon. Not even slightly surprising. This isn't like I am going, if you didn't hear this, you're going to be stunned. Like, not even
Sun
slightly.
sets
Yeah.
at night, rises in the
Yeah.
morning, grass is
Yeah.
green. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Bear shits in woods. Like,
Yeah.
this is not me breaking some surprising news that I saw on Twitter. What it does bring me to talk about, though, is there's just no way he isn't on this NXT versus main roster exhibition if John Cena loves him that much. Like, he's got to be on it. And then on top of it, too, it's kind of funny because for the last year or so, there was so much put into like the Javon Evans chase to the NXT title, and Javon Evans, like, he's going to be the one to beat Oba. He obviously ends up not being that. And, it seemed like they were about to pull the trigger and they didn't. And it seemed like he was getting closer and whatever. And it seems like they kind of delayed it. Now, I'm like, shit, putting the NXT title on him might be, I don't want to say a waste of his time because that sounds like a negative, but he can just go up. Like, he's already getting all of these interactions with these main guys. He just faced Gunther. He's facing Sheamus on these live events. Cena's raving about him. If he has an exhibition match, he already faced Orton. if he has an exhibition match against, I don't know, an LA Knight, something like that, like he's ready to go. He should be in the Rumble and then be right into the, answering Ilya's open challenge or facing Dom for the IC title, something. Like, I don't know if I necessarily want the Javon NXT title run anymore because he's ready for the main roster.
He is absolutely ready, don't get me wrong, but I for sure still want the NXT title run and more from Javon. I mean, he is only 21. Like another 2 years in NXT, even less than that, is not gonna kill the guy. He is still gonna be floating around main roster and NXT, I'm sure, if they hold him in NXT for so long. Part of the problem being NXT needs it,
Yeah.
more than the main roster needs it right now. He comes up to the main roster, he might just be floating around for a little while. He might kind of get some spots here or there, but might not get any big moments. You got the Obas and the Tricks and the Ricky Saints of the world that aren't going to be in NXT for all much longer. Ethan Page probably won't be in NXT all much longer. Who do you got after that if you don't got Javon Evans? Realistically, it is a little tough. We're filming this, recording this on Wednesday. Last night was NXT Gold Rush, in which Javon Evans and Leon Slater should have fucking won the tag titles. They absolutely should have beat Dark State and be tag team champions right now. Big booking mistake. Cancel Christmas on that one. Javon Evans, though, is that kind of guy that I want him to have the accolades. Like I wish by now, and I was on board with him being the guy to beat Oba, and get that big underdog win, but it was tough to kind of get him there without him having the prior championship, like North American championship run, or even like a small tag title stint prior to that. And I know Ricky Saints didn't either, but it's a whole other topic when you're talking about Ricky Saints and Javon Evans. He is still young. I want Javon Evans to come up to the main roster, but be a former this, a former that, a former this, a former that. I think he could use the accolades, and I think he's the perfect baby face to hold that NXT championship eventually. Doesn't have to have some illustrious year long run with it. But then when he finally drops it to the up and coming Jasper Troy or Shiloh Hill or whoever, you now have an established heel again in one of those guys. Uh, there's a whole other influx of talent. Who knows who can eventually emerge? Miles Bourne's being pushed a lot. Tavion Heights is being pushed a lot. But I think Javon Evans is, without Oba, Trick, Ricky, Ethan Page, Javon Evans is NXT. You kind of need him there.
It's interesting thinking about the NXT exhibition matches with the main roster because some of the people that come to mind, it's like, well, these people might be on the main roster in a week or two. So, like,
Yeah.
do you even do a Trick Williams in an exhibition match or an Oba Femi in an exhibition match if they're getting called up in the next week? You know what I mean? Like, it almost feels the NXT exhibition needs to be for people who are then going to go back down to NXT and still be in NXT for a bit. It makes more sense for Javon Evans to have it if he's not coming up right away compared to an Oba who's probably going to be in the Rumble, like, or like answering Ilya's open challenge or something like that. You know what I mean? Like,
I could
it,
see though, like it 100% agree. The only guy I think it like works for that is about to come up would be Oba, because like if you get Oba in a match versus like a Sheamus you had mentioned in the past, a big vet, and Oba gets that win,
yeah.
okay, then let's fucking pull him up. Where Javon Evans can probably take the L realistically to whoever he faces, and he'll live to see another day.
Yeah, I completely agree. But just thinking on when you like brand it as NXT versus main roster, like exhibition, Javon getting one at the same time, like to play devil's advocate to myself. He was already in the Cena tournament. He already uh, has faced people on Raw, on SmackDown. He's been in tag matches. Like, he's had these main roster matches where it's like, does he even fit the bill for an NXT exhibition? Like, to me, that feels like someone who really needs it, or like these really like NXT for a while type people. Now, if Javon's going to stay in NXT for 2 more years, sure. But when I think of like Trick and Oba, I think they will get matches, but it's like they might be on the main roster a week later, and it's like, did they even need that match? Did they even need that spotlight? Does it even make sense for them to be in that match? You know who's gonna have a match, and they probably need it. Fucking Dark State is probably gonna have a match on there.
I hope not. I really hope not. You know what they should do with Javon Evans? They should bring back 205 Live and make the ropes purple and have him run that show. No, that's what they would have done if this was a few years ago. There's a lot of like dream matches. I love the idea of like the crossover. Hell, I think this is something they should do once a year is have some sort of NXT main roster exhibition to get some focal points on some of these superstars. Javon Evans could realistically get in the ring with anybody come that crossover event. You got a guy like Oba, he should take on a Sheamus, get a win over somebody big if he goes up. Trick Williams, like you said, yeah, probably not far from coming up either. Is it worth using a trick when you have other talent? But again, this could be a way to transition the guys to the main roster. If Oba gets a win over Sheamus, that is a way to kind of push him to the main roster. I don't think Javon is quite main roster yet, so I think his more so would be just a match, a highlight match. He goes back down to NXT for a little bit. What if you have Trick Williams face The Miz and Carmelo finds his way down there, gets involved to some degree, and that's how we get Trick coming up. He repairs with Carmelo. Maybe there's a story to be told there, and it's deeper than it being just an exhibition. We forget about it. A lot of these superstars are on the come up. It is tough because the couple names I've mentioned, Ricky, Oba, Javon, Ethan Page, I want to see them all involved. But I also do like the idea of like a Miles Bourne maybe getting a lick at it. That's 4 or 5 men right there. I've mentioned that I'd rather it not be a 5-on-5 elimination style match, and they're still going to squeeze in a women's match or two. Sol Ruka, Zarya have had a match or two on SmackDown, so maybe they hold off on them and they get the Blake Monroes or the JC Janes and Tatum Paxley's out there, but it still is on Peacock. We've mentioned this as well. It's still a Saturday night's main event. It's not going to be a 5-hour show. It still has a John Cena retirement main event, likely against Gunther. That's probably going to go 30 plus minutes. And then we're probably going to get an hour plus worth of John Cena packages as we should. So 4 more matches, maybe at most. Maybe we get 2 women, 2 men's matches. I don't hate the idea of even titles being involved. Fuck, have Dragon Lee and Styles defend the titles against Javon and Leon Slater. I
They'll
don't think
face
they're.
Dark State.
Yeah, they'll face Dark State, which is unfortunate. But Javon and Leon Slater would be a lot better. But I don't even hate the idea of titles getting involved somewhere, add some stakes to it. It's shaping up to be something special, though. I do hope this is something they run back. They're not going to have John Cena retire every December 13th from here on, but every December, doing kind of like an exhibition, get some NXT highlight names out there. I think it's different. I like it.
Yeah, bridging that gap between Survivor Series and the Rumble. And who knows, maybe next year you do it an exhibition, exhibition matches, and if any NXT wrestlers win, they get a spot in the Rumble, something like that, where they're the guaranteed Rumble spot, something. Uh Javon, Oba, and Trick. A little less Javon, more so Oba and Trick. They're kind of the prime example of what Shotzi was talking about, or not Shotzi. It was Gigi Dolan talking about with her conversation with Triple H about call ups and
How Javon Evans makes $30,000 a year.
no, no, not that.
Yeah.
Would she like kind of put more into that?
Yeah.
Uh, about how it's not a necessarily like being ready thing. It's just they need specific roles, and do they have the room for you, or do they need you to come up and fit that specific bill? Random comparison, but like Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman wasn't ready for the main roster, but he fit that perfect role that they were looking for the Wyatt family. Like
Like
that's
9 matches in.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like he was literally learning on the main roster. Like I think Chad Gable was like laughing about having a conversation with him, and he was like, "Oh, thanks, that was my fifth match." It's
Yeah.
like what? So it goes to that where like yes, Oba is ready, Trick is ready, Javon is ready, but when you look at Oba, I immediately am like, all right, he's got to go on the opposite brand of whatever brand Gunther is on.
For
So
now.
for now. So say Gunther is going to be on Raw going forward. He's got to be on SmackDown. Does SmackDown have anybody that kind of fits the Oba bill? Or say Gunther does go to SmackDown. It's like, oh, we need Oba on Raw. Okay. Do you want him there when you have Braun Breaker and, a Bronson Reed that are kind of filling that like big bruiser, never lose type guy? Or do you want him to be on the same brand as a Sheamus or same brand as a Gunther, whatever? That's where it goes into like fitting the role. Trick, if they wanted someone for a Carmelo or a feud for Carmelo, he might fit the bill perfectly. If they're not looking for that, that's not, it's to no fault of their own. So it does add like to our questioning because we don't know what they're going to be looking for in a week or two from now. A week or two from now, they might be looking for someone to come up, beat Ilya, and hold the U.S. title for 7 months. And it's like, shit, Oba fits the bill. That's your guy. But if
Yeah.
they're not, if they're looking for someone to be a high flyer and face Ilya for 2, 3 weeks, it's going to be Fraxium. It's going to be DIY, whatever.
And NXT, I do think part of the issue right now is again that NXT needs the help a little bit. NXT's roster is thinning when it comes to like top talent right now for the men and the women. The women's roster was even stacked at a point, and it still is in a way. But if we're being honest, the JC Janes and the Jordan Graces are great, and Tatum Paxley's impressive, but in our opinion, the Izzy Dames and the Lola Vices and Jada Parkers aren't the same value of the Julias and Stephanies that were once there that made the roster really that great. It's tough when you have, again, it is a slot you're trying to fill on that main roster. It's kind of timing, but you have a Trick Williams, an Obafemi, a Ricky Saints, an Ethan Page, a Javon Evans. Your five top guys are all main roster ready. Ready to go up. Call them up today. They will sink instead of, or they will float instead of sinking. Like it is. It's not often you have that much talent at one time ready to go. I don't predict them calling up five guys at once come the Rumble. I guess they could, but that's a lot of talent to kind of influx at once. So who kind of stays, who kind of goes? Oba is fucking so ready. Did you see the promo from Oba against Ricky
Yeah.
from NXT?
Him with
Yeah,
his shirt
Oba.
off.
Yeah, his shirt off. Oba, dude, the crowd was going nuts. I get it; it's the theater on MSG, but Oba has some unreal potential. I do think he should counteract Gunther for a little bit, and then down the line, Oba Femi versus Gunther, WrestleMania 45 in Philadelphia. Hopefully, they run it back.
Yeah.
It's going to be electric. I do have to bring up the point that we mentioned the NXT exhibitions at Saturday Night's main event. Who are they going to leave out? Who's going to get a match? Who's not going to get a match? Whoever doesn't get a match is going to be hand selected by John Cena to be in the Iron Survivor matches, I imagine. That's how I think they're
Yeah.
making more sense out of it. If Obafemi gets the match at Saturday Night's main event, he's not going to be in the Iron Survivor. That's how they're still going to give the shouts to the Tavion Heights of the world, who likely aren't at Saturday Night's main event, but still get some sort of recognition from John Cena.
Also, I just thought Lash, like she just got called
Yeah,
up because she fit specifically what they were looking for. When you could say like a Jordan Grace is more ready, but she
yeah.
doesn't fit the bill of exactly what they needed. One name I did want to talk about from NXT, where I very well could see them in the Iron Survivor. I very well could see them having one of the exhibition matches, or I could see them possibly being in neither. I want your thoughts on Joe Hendry. Now that he is a full time WWE wrestler, he is in NXT. Maybe he pops up on TNA here or there, but he is now under contract with WWE. So now it's all right. What are they going to really do with him? Right now, they're doing the story of him and Thea Hale versus Ethan Page and Chelsea Green. Very well, Joe Hendry could take the North American title off of Ethan Page, but that story, you kind of assume they would go for someone that's American, or even like an El Grande Americano, someone to pay off what they're doing with Ethan Page. Would feel weird if a Scottish person won it, but at the same time, it's Joe Hendry, and he, is beloved by many. Cena seems to really like him. So if Cena really likes him, it goes into, is he going to be in an exhibition match? Or we're talking about a guy who faced Randy Orton at WrestleMania. Is he just instead in the Iron Survivor? And we're starting to work towards Joe Hendry into the main event scene of the NXT title again. And now that he's full time NXT, it helps the numbers of guys that they have. So Trick Williams or an Obafemi can go up, and Joe Hendry slides into that spot full time.
I can see Joe Hendry kind of, being in the Iron Survivor, probably losing the Iron Survivor, which is fine. But then honestly being a little fast tracked and being in the Rumble match himself, maybe again doesn't win the Rumble,
Second
obviously,
year in
but
a row
that's
would be.
yeah, second year in a row. But that's kind of his like call up. Hendry kind of fits the bill to be, if they run a multi-man US title or IC title match at Mania, I think Hendry fits the bill to be kind of in that matchup. Uh, Hendry's obviously popular. His whole shtick went on for a while. Is it kind of slowing down? Yeah, it's slowing down. The Hendry shtick was the biggest thing in wrestling at a point, and it can only stay so big for so long. So I don't want to call it testing the waters with Hendry, but I do think he's the kind of guy that they're gonna need to get like a little main roster stint and see if it sticks before they do anything super crazy with him, like have him come out on a lawnmower. Uh, but Joe
He come out
Hendry,
on like a ship or a horse or something
yeah, yeah,
with
or
like
like
his
Paul
face.
Burchill swing from
Yeah,
a rope,
yeah, with his
yeah.
face painted.
Joe Hendry, I could see it either way. Either I do think he is either in a Saturday Night's main event match or B in the Iron Survivor. Either one, fine with me. You have him at Saturday Night's main event. Who does he face though? I don't know if that holds as much value to me as showcasing the Tricks, the Obas, the Rickies, the Ethans.
I got a match for you.
Yeah, let me hear it.
I fucking love Joe Hendry versus Drew McIntyre.
Yeah, I see. I think that's like one that
It's
you
got
know.
it's got a story already to it that like the hardcore fans
Yeah,
are
yeah,
in
yeah,
on, and
yeah.
it's like, I don't think Joe Hendry would win, but I mean, losing to Drew McIntyre
It's
doesn't hurt
fine. Yeah.
anybody. Yeah.
I think that's one that, like, on paper, you can't really go, oh, we're going to do this in 10 months. And then it definitely happens. You have to kind of have things line up. But I think that's one that they would maybe more so want to hold, or I would hope at least. They waste some matches with Crown Jewel and all that junk. So who knows. But I could see that. Maybe not this Mania, but that'd be like a showcase match for Joe Hendry to take on a Drew McIntyre. Um, to spitball a couple of these Saturday Night's main event matches, like again, Oba versus Sheamus would be great. Joe Hendry versus McIntyre, Trick versus a Miz or somebody. Who do you have an Ethan Page or a Ricky Face or Blake Monroe, JC Jane? Who do you have them all go after? Stephanie was just down in NXT. Julia was just down in NXT. Roxanne even was just there. The woman getting involved, it would almost have to be a Charlotte or a Becky or a Bailey or, maybe a more so veteran name. Same with the men.
Yeah, and it also goes to like how many champions do you want to involve? Not just main roster champions, but NXT champions. Do you see it as like, oh, Ricky Saints needs to have a match because he's the NXT champion? Or do you see it as Ricky Saints doesn't need to have a match because he's the NXT champion? You know what I mean? Like it,
What if they just run Ricky versus Cody?
dude.
Dude.
I actually, you know what I actually genuinely thought? My first
Uh,
thought would be like Ricky and Cody would team and take on.
Edge and Christian in a tag match, right?
Yes,
Yes. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Refereed by Ariel Hawani.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. That would actually be an interesting way to do it, like a Cody teaming with a Ricky to take on, let's throw together a Trick and a Carmelo, or and then another NXT and main roster
Yeah,
kind of co-pairing. I can get down with that. I'm not opposed.
yeah. I immediately think of Punk teaming with Rollins when
Yeah,
Rollins was in NXT, and it's your WWE champion and NXT champion teamed up. Like I could see that being the way they have some people on. I could also just see Cody being there and doing a backstage segment,
yeah,
with shaking hands with a Ricky saying, "I'm proud of you," whatever, like
yeah.
it. Who knows? So that's kind of like the big monkey wrench for me. When you say NXT exhibition because you want to showcase the NXT talent, is it You want to showcase the guys who are about to be called up, or do you want to showcase the people who like really need it? Where it would, go into the argument like Jordan Grace doesn't necessarily need the showcase match because Jordan Grace is probably going to be on the main roster not too long from now and probably immediately into some relevant story because she's like that level. You would think someone like a Jada Parker or a Lola Vice or whatever might fit the bill more if you're trying to get those lesser level to really get that next bump up, the Tavion Heights, the Miles Bournes, like that. Or do you want it to be the top names from NXT who are still going to be there for a little bit? And you get Jordan Grace and you get Blake Monroe and Ricky Saints and Ethan Page and whatever and Oba Femi. And it's just the top dogs that you're showing off. So that's kind of where I'm like, I'm kind of stuck. It's like, are you looking to do the top names of NXT get these marquee matches? Or are you trying to benefit like that next crop who pretty soon is going to be bumped to that Obafemi, Ethan Page slot of NXT, and they need the help to get that little bump up.
It is tough. I can see them going with a little bit of a mix of both, kind of. If it
Yeah.
were up to me, I would say honestly, I think every if you were to do this every year, like I said, every December you run this NXT exhibition. It depends on the current crop of NXT talent. Realistically, it kind of also depends on the main roster crop because again, you're not going to have the Ilias that were just in NXT face these NXT guys right now. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. If it were up to me, I would say right now you kind of showcase the ones that are about to be up. I do think this is the time to get the Obas, the Javons, the Rickies, the Ethan Pages, a little bit more main roster screen time right before they come up. I think it kind of helps propel them a little bit more. Uh, Oba hasn't had any main roster stint. He hasn't even popped up in the crowd like Ethan
Which
Page,
I love.
which I also love. 100% agreed. So for a guy like Oba, it holds a little bit more weight than it even does for Javon per se, who is again maybe more likely to stay in NXT for a while. I would say showcase your Obas and your tricks, and maybe if you're going to get the women involved, I think Blake Monroe they probably want to get somewhere. Uh, Blake and Tiffany, I feel like makes sense a little bit, even though Tiffany is not that far out of NXT. That might be something that, again, on paper, though, that's a feud for a future time. Maybe you don't want to waste that. This is still a crown jewel type matchup. You don't want to waste everything you got on some throwaway match. It maybe makes more sense for Oba to not take on Gunther at that event because you want to save that.
I'm glad you mentioned Oba hasn't really had these kind of mix-ins with the main roster like Javon has had and Jordan Grace being in the Rumble and
Yep.
whatnot. Mainly because I want when Oba steps foot on a main roster show,
Main roster.
he got a one-way ticket. Like he's not, they're not just giving him a little bit of a rub and all right, it'll help the NXT numbers for his match next week, or all right, let's keep showcasing Javon here and there, and then keep him in NXT for a bit. No, I want Oba to be, oh, he's here. His first appearance is that exhibition, and he beats Sheamus, and the match ends, and it's Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce arguing backstage on who wants to hire him, who wants
Yeah.
to get him. It's something like that, and he's just on the main roster. So I'm glad you mentioned that because Oba is like the one guy. I mean, we're like if Gunther never had existed, this would have been an Oba
Oba
Stan
Femi
account
Stan
for a
account. Yeah.
long time.
We
But
can
Gunther
it
does.
can still be an Oba Femi Stan account. Oba and Gunther and then Oba.
Yeah,
It's it's
it's a little
very
thicker. It's a little
yeah.
thicker.
I
I love
I'm a
Oba.
I love Oba. I think Oba is like it's hard to say the next face of the company sometimes because you never know. But Oba is, if I had to put my stocks into anybody, Oba is going to be a game player for a long time to come. Uh, he really is like the next big thing. He is the next big thing. And there's so many next big things. We're still working on Braun Breakers and Bronson Reeds and guys like that. But there's something about Oba that is just so special. And they haven't quite had a talent like that in a long time. I'm looking forward to his eventual main roster start, and I agree. I want it to be main roster and main roster only from the second he pops up there. I don't need him buying tickets like this is SmackDown versus Raw and he's showing up in the crowd. A Rumble, pop up wouldn't have killed me a year ago, but I'm kind of glad in hindsight that it didn't happen because I want him to be main roster and main roster only once that does happen.
I have said so many times how much I hate like the super long losing streaks. It's pretty overdone nowadays. Uh, Especially now with like wrestlers not wrestling as much. You know, um, I don't need some 2 year long undefeated streak, whatever. Oba is like he is kind of that exception where I'm like just how Gunther was when he gets called up. Yeah,
Undefeated forever.
I'm cool with 2 years of him just not losing,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
where he's a mid card champion and then wins the heavyweight title and just vacates the
yeah,
IC or US title. Like, yeah, that's he's the exception. Maybe
yeah,
maybe that's his nickname going for like the exception. He's the exception
yeah.
to a lot of these things. A lot of
You know,
these rules, a lot of these things that you think of. He's the exception.
I was kind of even like hoping for a long while, and it's no shade on Ricky. I love Ricky. But I was kind of hoping that Oba would just relinquish the NXT title. Like, I beat the title reign. I'm your longest champion. Take this shit back. I'm going to the fucking Raw, baby.
Yeah.
Whatever. I kind of wanted him to do that because he never lost, and he's still this beast of a guy, even with the loss to Ricky Saints. But he is he's the only guy right now with the potential to be on a run like that. Gunther is becoming the next Roman Reigns. He's the next guy to maybe have a fucking 1,000-day title run. Who knows? But Oba is the next like undefeated up and coming big bad. Oba is still 27. I don't even know how old he is.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's like, the guy's young though. He's a
Probably
lot
mid
younger.
20s.
Yeah, younger than us, which is crazy because he is 5 times bigger than I am. But he has potential out the ass to really be the biggest thing in the company. When it's said and done, we look at John Cena. John Cena retiring 25 years. He's been around for a minute. Before John Cena, there just wasn't John Cena. There was the Stone Colds and the Rocks, and then you get a John Cena out of nowhere, and you don't quite know what you have until it's said and done. And I think that's going to kind of be an Obafemi. I think people are going to love him while he's here, but when he's said and done, you're going to look back at Obafemi as one of the greatest to ever do it.
So to wrap things up here, next week's pod we have Survivor Series predictions. Then the following week, we should probably already know some matchups or at least the direction because you're a week and a half, 2 weeks away from that Saturday night's main event show. So I'll end this pod one match. Triple H, he's on Do Not Disturb right now, so I'm not gonna bother him. But when his Do Not Disturb flicks off, one match you can make. He says, "Let me know. What do you want on there? I'm only giving you one. What would you do?"
One match on Saturday night's main event, NXT versus main roster exhibition. I do like the idea of Trick versus Miz, and you involve Carmelo, and that somehow leads to Trick and Carmelo on the main roster together. Carmelo's been great. Trick is fantastic. I think them tag teaming for a little bit adds a little depth to the tag division. I think they'd be very fresh together again. But there is something about Oba versus Sheamus that I think would really be the stepping stone to get over big time and coming to the main roster. I'm going to go with Oba Sheamus, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to do the same answer. Like Obo versus a guy like Sheamus would probably be.
We're going to get off
But
this and I'm going to be like, this match would have been what I said.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, as we're sitting here, I'm like, man, I feel like LA Knight's got to face someone.
Yeah.
He kind of fits the bill for like not a
Ethan
champion.
Page to me. I feel like LA
LA
Ethan would be
LA
great.
Ethan would be great. I mean, that's a great one. Um, I do love the idea of AJ Styles and Dragon Lee taking on Javon and Leon Slater. I
Yeah.
don't think that'll happen. So if I can only get one, oh, it really is kind of tough. I think I might. Mm, You would think that when I posed this question, I like had an answer in mind. I did not. I just posed it. I think I think I would not have as many champions on. I would try
Mhm.
to avoid, I mean, especially the tag team champions.
You don't want Dark State versus the entire Raw roster. Yeah.
No. Um, so I think I would lean towards non-champions and focus on there. And I think Javon's got to have a match.
Mhm.
And if it's not that tag team match against Styles and Dragon Lee, and he's with a Leon Slater, or hell, if he's not with I don't know, Ricky Saints, whatever. If he goes one on one, I think I would like Javon AJ one on one.
Yeah, Javon AJ one-on-one is good. I was gonna say like a Javon Penta match would be great, but that's just gonna happen at some point anyways.
Yeah.
So I would more so like to see from the main roster side of things, it be the vets, like the Styles, the Sheamuses, the Ortons of the world that are getting involved. Again, it's no shade on some of the younger talent, but uh, I don't necessarily need even like JD McDonough to have one of these matches. Like it just doesn't
Dom
make
doesn't
sense.
need to have one of these
Dom doesn't need to
matches.
have one of these
Yeah.
matches. Like a lot of these younger, fresher guys, it makes sense to really showcase the NXT talent. You would have Javon Evans take on an AJ Styles.
And also, I'm glad you mentioned that. With AJ retiring
Hmm.
next year, we need AJ to, yeah, it pained me to even fucking say that and how quick it
Get
came
ready
out.
to cry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah.
Uh, we got to have AJ mix it up with some of these, you know, NXT guys that he's probably not going to mix it up with because he's going to be retiring quite soon. So if it is, I know AJ's the tag champ, so you'd probably have him in a tag match, but have AJ defend the tag titles with Dragon Lee on Raw against whoever, the Creed Bros, I don't know, and on the exhibition of exhibition shows. Because again, Dragon Lee is still kind of fits that younger category where I don't necessarily need Dragon Lee who like wrestles in AAA and NXT, here and there. I think I would like Styles versus Javon Evans one on one. You know, Javon's obviously going to take the L, but gets that handshake from Styles after, raises his
Great
hand,
fucking
and
match.
shit, Javon might go into that match as fucking X Division champion. He could face Leon
Hmm.
Slater for the title with how their tag match ended. Who knows? I think that would be like my one fantasy book if I'm not getting Oba.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. If I had to give Javon a match, it would be AJ Styles for certain. So I can get down with that. I get down with everything that's going on right now. Wrestling was in a little bit of a slump for a while, but I'm loving the build to War Games right now. I'm loving the build to the John Cena retirement, the tournament matches, the entirety of this NXT main roster exhibitions, the slow build to the Rumble. I'm having a blast with it all.
We're gonna have a blast talking about it all, as I will not have a blast going to do the work that I have to do. But subscribe, follow, do whatever, come hang out. We'll be live for Survivor Series. Yeah.
Don't be a coward.